Good morning, Adams County. It's Friday, and today we're going to be talking about study strategies, so the best ways that you can perform in the classroom while you're doing your homework and when you're taking tests. The important thing to note about when you're studying or learning new concepts is that everyone learns differently. So the way that you learn is not going to be exactly the same as the way that the person next to you will learn. And that is going to make a difference when it comes time for how you learn and study to prepare for big tests or assignments. Just because something works really well for you does not mean it's going to also work for the person that you're studying with. While you may feel that during high school you got a pretty good grasp on what type of strategy works best for you, a lot of times that is going to change once you get to college. And to figure out your best learning strategy, that's going to be a lot of trial and error until you figure out what is going to be the best learning style for you. The reason that college is different than high school is it's more than just a repetition of facts. You have to be able to understand these concepts that you're learning in college and not only apply them, but make connections between what you've learned in this class and in another class that you might have taken previously. Using these connections wisely and making them effective is one of the best ways to measure how well you know this information. Perhaps the most important piece of a successful study strategy is that you need to find the right environment for you to be working in. So what that means, you want to work in a classroom, work in the library, maybe in your own dorm room. Whichever environment is best for you, you need to figure that out and then stick with it, because that's going to help you get the best results in terms of your grades and your classes. For this video, I'm going to be talking about three different areas. They're in the classroom, when you're by yourself doing homework, and when you're preparing for tests. First, when you're in the classroom like we are right now, there's a couple key points to keep in mind, especially during class itself, to help make sure that you learn this information correctly and to the best of your ability. So the first main point here really comes down to how you take notes. There's a whole big debate over whether taking notes by hand or using your computer is better for you. Some professors will allow you to use your computer or an iPad or tablet during class, and others will simply say no technology during class. But to finish this debate, there's actually conclusive research that shows that people who use computers during class are much more likely to be distracted, and you can find links to this research down below. Overall though, writing notes by hand is going to be your best way of learning the information to your fullest ability. However, while taking notes by hand is important, you also really have to listen, because a lot of times what your professor is talking about won't be exactly portrayed up in the PowerPoint presentation or slides or video that they're showing. It's going to take a lot of balance for you to make sure that you get all the information that is present on the slides, and then also make sure you're listening to what the professor says. Your notes should be a hybrid between what the lecturer is saying and what the slides on the projector are showing you. Some professors might actually give you a copy of the slides before the lecture starts. However, if they do this, do make sure that you pay attention in class. Don't think that you can just zone out because you already have the notes down in front of you. This is especially when you can pay attention to what the professor is saying and make sure it's complementing what is already down on the page. And don't forget, if there's something that the professor says that you don't quite understand, raise your hand and ask a question about it. That's what college is all about, you putting yourself out there to learn. So if there's something you don't understand, do ask a question about it. The last point for the classroom is that if you have a professor that says, you should remember this because it's going to be on the test, they're not kidding. It will actually be on the test. Oftentimes they'll slap it as one really big essay question just to make sure you are actually paying attention in class. Alright, this brings us to our second point, which is homework. Now a lot of times, a lot of us think of homework as something that we just have to do and it's not really a learning experience. But when you get to college, homework is a lot of how you learn, and it's really crucial that you do it because it does work in tandem with what you're learning in the lecture. As I'm sure you've heard, college is a lot of reading, and in that case, a lot of people like to highlight or take notes while they're reading. And the important thing about this is, don't highlight everything. It doesn't help because you'll just be staring at what used to be a white page and is now this bright fluorescent pink. So highlight essential points, draw lines to make connections between different points, but only highlight the most relevant information and not everything. When doing homework, you also want to limit the distractors around you as much as possible. So that might be other people, but oftentimes it is going to be social media and Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all that stuff. The best way to do it is to just turn off your phone. For those of you that have never done this before, there's a little button at the top, and if you hit that, it actually will turn off the phone. It's a really magical contraption. When you're doing your homework, you don't want to do homework marathons either. Do be sure to take breaks, because if you just keep going for hours on end, your brain's going to get tired and you're not going to be doing your homework to the best of your ability. Take breaks every hour, roughly 5 to 10 minutes or so. You want to get up, take a little walk around to stretch yourself out, get the blood flowing again, so that way when you sit back down again, you'll be ready to go for the next hour. The last point for homework then is always do the assignments. No matter how small or easy the assignment may be, it is going to be beneficial for you to do it, so do take the time to do all of your homework assignments no matter what. So this brings us to the final section of today's video, which is talking about the best ways to study before a test or exam. This is where you're going to see the most variation in the different types of studying, so you can pick which one is best for you or do a whole sample of various different ones to try and get the best of all the different worlds. So probably the most classic way of studying for exams is just simply going through your big notebook of notes from class and just reading through it again. There's a slight variation on this one, which a couple of people I've known do, where they actually take their original notes from class, get a second notebook, and recopy the notes into that new notebook, so that way they're really engaged with that material as they're recopying it. If the traditional way isn't really for you, there are several online versions that you can use. Two that I recommend are called Memrise and Quizlet. Memrise, which you can find the link here, is a website where you can go and make your own flashcards about anything that you want, and then it'll help you learn whatever the material is. It's really good for vocab, so I'd recommend that. The second one then is Quizlet, which you can find the link here. It is also a flashcard making website, so it does the same thing as Memrise does, so you can pick and choose between whether you want Memrise or Quizlet. Both of them are very good. Probably the study method that I most prefer is based on the mentality of if you can teach it, you know it. When I was preparing for exams, I would go find an empty classroom and go give a lecture inside of this empty room, which sometimes ended up there was other people that showed up, so you just have to watch out for that and hope you're not saying anything wrong. Even if you choose not to use a whole classroom for this, maybe sit down with a friend of yours in class and see if you can teach them the material, so that way you have someone there to fact check you while you're doing it. Along the lines of doing it with a partner, there is also group studying that you can do. However, you should not start studying in a group. You want to make sure that you have the knowledge first, and then when you're with the group, you can all refine that knowledge and really hone it in on the necessary areas. Working with a group is a really good way to make those connections that we talked about earlier in the video. Professors want to see that you have a depth of knowledge, not just a superficial understanding. They want to see that you are able to apply this knowledge and make connections with it. So working with a group in that setting is a very good idea. If you're feeling ambitious, you can always put your notes to a song, though that can be a little tricky when you're trying to remember the song during the test. And when you're studying, do make sure that if you have any questions that neither you or a friend in the class has an answer to, send an email to your professor or go to their office hours and ask them the question yourself. They will be happy to help you out with it. So as I've said many times before, don't be afraid to ask for help. And now we're just going to go through a couple last points for the test. 1, like we said with homework, make sure that you take breaks. Number 2, you want to make sure that you get enough sleep. I know we talked about that a couple weeks ago during the Health in College video. So do make sure that you are getting the proper amount of sleep, especially on the night before an exam. Number 3, be confident in your test-taking abilities. If you go in saying, I can do this, you will. Number 4, dress fancy on the test day, whether that means you're wearing a full 3-piece suit and tie, or you're going to wear a nice dress. No matter what, you're going to feel more confident in yourself, and you're going to look good when you take this test. Number 5 is that you don't want to cram for your tests. You want to spend time every day studying, whether it's just half an hour or an hour, but that way when you're doing this daily review, it'll help you recall this information a lot better than if you just study for hours on end the day before the test. So this brings about the end of this week's video. Make sure to go back and review any of the points that we talked about, whether it's in the classroom, when you're doing homework, or when you're preparing for a test, because these are very valuable strategies that will help you to achieve high grades when you are in college. If you have any questions about the research that I talked about earlier, or how to use Memrise or Quizlet or anything else that I talked about today, do get in touch with me and I'll be happy to help you out. Alright, Adams County, I'll see you next week.